And we're going to continue on this theme of fame and shame. Topic today is 60. Ain't no shame in turning 60. I just did so the other day. It's a milestone. It's a marker by chronological standards, by cultural standards, by species standards. There was a time when this was really a rarity to be 60. And depending upon who looks at this right now, on the perspective that we're taking, it can appear to be either good news or not so good news. As joyful, discouraging, as another part of the adventure, or a blow to the ego. Our choice, our choice. But we all know that with age is a ruthless teacher, and that it launches us into fame and shame with the passage of time. You know, growing old ain't for sissies, as the old saying goes. It happens to all of us, right? No escaping it. No escaping the wrinkling of the skin or your aching knees, or the unruliness of our bodies as they age, the aches, the pains, the wearing out and the needing assistance, the canes, the orthopedic shoes, the medication, oh yes, and the noises, the voluntary and involuntary noises that come out unexpectedly, right? Right? We all know this. And the forgetful memory. No, aging is not a concept, really, really. But it's not all bad news. There's a lot of wisdom that comes with aging, right? The wisdom that grows out of experience, out of 60 years of in-the-moment problem solving, living through births and deaths and sicknesses, colds and flus, and now a pandemic. Who would have thought? Yes, folks, we're living through history. History is being made right now, along with the continuation of other histories we'd rather forget or wish never happened, but cannot, because we have lived through them and are living with a history right now and making it concurrently. We cannot, right? We cannot forget, because paying attention also shows us the way out of this suffering. Aging also brings a certain kind of everyday wisdom that has been honed through repetition. And that's the only way that it comes, is through aging, the repetition again and again every day, right? Internalizing habits of taking care of ourselves, or not, but which often go unnoticed until they become harder to do, which I might add, does happen with time. And sadly, this wisdom is underrated, underappreciated, and very much taken for granted. One day, we might marvel at another's ability to make a cup of coffee or tea, or get dressed, or put clear thoughts together to speak or to communicate. Aging affords wisdom that comes from living on planet Earth, from living in an environment that entrains us to figure out how to manage the tensions that are before us. We're seeing how humankind, generation after generation, are surviving and thriving, or not, in the habitat that, for now, supports our existence. With age comes a deepening awareness that the tensions that plagued our ancestors are also the tensions that plague us. Lo and behold, greed, hatred, and ignorance do seem to reign supreme. That's the understanding from the Buddha. That's what he came to, and it appears to be correct as far as I can tell so far. But no. Aging is really not a concept. It's real, and with it comes the bitter sweetness of being alive. And then, by 60, for sure, it's been a bumpy ride, but hopefully we've learned a little along the way. So at 60 years, I'm 10 years older than my mother was when she died. That means at 50, I passed through the threshold of her passing. Sometimes I imagine what her life would be like if she was living at this age right now. Our lives would be so different. You see, we were really opposites. She was my best friend, but we were very different. 60 takes me farther out to sea into uncharted territory, but for my own navigation, tethered perhaps by the memory of my maternal grandmother, who was 60 when I came along. And to my mind, she was ancient. To my mind now, 60 though keeps changing. It doesn't look the same. It doesn't sound the same. It doesn't act the same. And I suspect it doesn't feel the same as it did 60 years ago. I saw my grandmother every day as a child, arriving on a bus, having walked 2 miles in a dress and heels. God love her. And then she'd come to the house and she would don a house dress, right? When she arrived. Like that was a time warp. Already when I was a kid, that was a time warp. Like, what are you doing? And it's even more so now by comparison. But looking back now, like through my own kid eyes, she was safe. She was strong, stoic, loving in an understated way. She was matronly. That word makes me laugh. It's such an old-fashioned word, but it really described her. It fit the bill. And she was proper, way too proper for me. But she was also beloved and wise and a trustworthy confidant, a careful observer and bold. She was a great role model for her age. Really, for any age, she was a great role model. 60 was complicated even then. Her gray hair and the way she carried herself told me she was older, but dignified, unhurried actually in her slowing and aging. And that was so helpful for me to observe. Someone growing old in that sort of dignified way. Okay, and by comparison, which is what the mind does, 60 right here looks very different and sounds very different from my grandmother at 60. And by comparison, different still from the imaginings of my older aging mother, my imagined older aging mother. But it suggests a trajectory that with each generation, the age itself seemed to change. Like what it meant to be a certain age was more fluid. It was not stable. Perhaps that has something to do with the fact that as humans, we keep living longer, at least for now anyway. But then there is now, like looking at magazines and looking at social media, there is 60s in the magazines. And 60 now in the magazines and the media, 60 is definitely trending as the new 40. Now that is a heavy and unrealistic burden. Talk about shaming, talk about comparing, talk about pining for a younger version. Please, this body is 60 years on planet Earth, 60 years of wear and tear. It is bound to hurt and ache in certain places. Let's be realistic. And let's get down to the nitty gritty of moi at 60, my own personal 60-year history, a narrative of marking time, of mistakes made, of not made, of celebrations celebrated or not, of sorrows, of regrets, of disappointment, the bittersweet of joys that echo forward to greet and remind me of love and connectedness, of being alive. Each one carving and reshaping this heart, this mind, and this body. So this past week, we were on Block Island. It's one of our favorite places to go. We love to go off season when no one's around. Usually the air is cooler, and if you're lucky, you might have a day when you can go in and swim. But it's really the rawness of the elements, earth, air, fire, water, space. It's all powerful there on an island. And there's space to be and meander and meditate. And so I walked a lot. I walked deliberately on the beach, in the labyrinth, in the hollows and maze of the island, and I deliberately reflected on my life so far. brought forth the ups and the downs, the joys and the sorrows, the moments when being in the spotlight felt good and didn't feel so good. Oh yes, the worldly winds were a-blowing, for sure. But here's the difference. I was looking through the lens of mindfulness, and I was seeing Susan, all the different ages of Susan, doing her best to navigate unpredictable situations and predictable ones, but doing the best nonetheless, and making mistakes, a ton of them, but earnest effort, much appreciated. Sure, it was a bumpy ride. Sure, lots of mistakes were made, but she kept plugging along. She kept being interested in learning the ways of non-harm and goodwill. I mean, what else was there to do? But that's what I chose to do. Good job, Susan. Keep going. And when the embarrassing moments arose, mindfulness, informed by and steeped in the voices of my elders, my benefactors, my friends, were reminding me, whispering in my ear, that I was still a good person, that I was on the path, and that I had good company. And that is what has given me the strength to keep standing up, to keep getting back up every time I've fallen and restabilized in the middle of this wild, wonderful, and sometimes scary life. None of us escape aging. None of us beat death. None of us avoid sickness or the worldly winds. We can honor our experiences. We can do that. We can practice and we can play and we can learn from our mistakes and keep developing our hearts. And we can remember that we're in good company. Look around, all of you. I mean that today. Look around the screen. You're in good company because all of us are interested in moving in the direction of non-harm and goodwill. So when you doubt yourself, try to see if you can bring forth that voice that says you're still a good person. Try to see if you can bring forth the memory of all of us sitting here right now today, that you're in good company and that you are on a path and that you really are moving in that direction of goodwill and non-harm. Rest your hearts there. We can do that for ourselves and for each other. We can do that. Thank you for your kind attention.